When Eilat Mazar realized she discovered an ancient structure near Jerusalem, she turned to the Bible to help explain what she found.
And she learned that this new discovery supports the biblical accounts of King David and his son Solomon.
For millennia, the final resting place of King Solomon, the legendary 10th century BCE monarch, often credited with building the first temple and presiding over Israel's golden age, has remained one of history's most enduring and tantalizing mysteries. Countless generations wondered where this great ruler was buried, and many believed the secret would never be revealed. But when King Solomon's tomb was finally unsealed after an astonishing 5,000 years, the discovery shocked everyone. Let's get started. The Tombs of the Kings in Jerusalem, located approximately 820 meters north of the old city walls, in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of East Jerusalem, the Tombs of the Kings is a striking example of monumental burial architecture. The facade, hewn into the limestone bedrock, is set within a large forecourt, measuring nearly 27 meters from east to west and 25 meters from north to south, accessed by a wide staircase cut into the rock. This monumental setting impressed early travelers and pilgrims who assumed it must be the burial place of Judah's ancient kings, hence the name. The association with biblical royalty dates back to at least the medieval period, when pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land sought tangible connections to the figures of the Hebrew Bible. The grandeur of the tomb complex led to the belief that it was the resting place of King David, King Solomon, or other monarchs of the Kingdom of Judah. It was cut with remarkable precision and sophistication. The facade once featured a classical-style portico decorated with pilasters, friezes, and a cornice displaying rosettes and geometric motifs. Beyond the entrance, subterranean chambers extend into the rock, including burial niches, sarcophagus repositories, and a chamber designed for rolling stone mechanisms to seal access points. These features demonstrate both the wealth of the family interred here and the blending of Jewish, Hellenistic, and Roman artistic traditions characteristic of elite burials in Jerusalem during the late Second Temple era. The scale and design also suggest that the tomb was intended for a dynasty rather than an individual. In 1863, French archaeologist and diplomat Louis-Félicien Joseph Cagnard de Saulcy undertook one of the earliest large-scale excavations of the site. Believing he had located the burial chambers of the kings of Judah, de Saulcy conducted extensive digging within the complex. His work uncovered a series of ornate sarcophagi, some of which bore Aramaic inscriptions. The most notable was a limestone sarcophagus inscribed with the name Queen Tzada, or Tzada Malka, which many scholars later interpreted as a reference to Queen Helena of Adiabene, or her family members. Helena was the queen of a small kingdom in northern Mesopotamia, who converted to Judaism in the 1st century CE and became a benefactor to Jerusalem, remembered for her famine relief efforts and lavish donations to the temple. De Saulcy removed several of the sarcophagi and associated artifacts and transported them to France. Some of these finds are now housed in the Louvre Museum in Paris, including the ornately carved sarcophagus thought to be linked with Queen Helena. His removal of the artifacts caused outrage among the local Jewish community in Jerusalem, who objected to the disturbance of what they considered sacred tombs. At the time, this protest represented one of the earliest instances of public resistance to Western archaeological practices in the Ottoman-controlled Holy Land. De Saulcy's work, though pioneering in scope, was criticized for its lack of systematic documentation, and the displacement of artifacts deprived later archaeologists of crucial context for interpreting the site. The identification of the Tombs of the Kings with Queen Helena of Adiabene gained wider acceptance in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as scholars re-examined de Saulcy's findings. The timing fits Helena's life. Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, records her arrival in Jerusalem around 45 CE, her lavish piety, and her burial in a mausoleum she commissioned for her family. The scale and grandeur of the complex match Josephus's description, and the 1st century dating of the sarcophagi aligns with this chronology. So, it turns out, the Tombs of the Kings was not King Solomon's tomb at all. That was a shocker, but the search does not end here. Other proposed or legendary sites. Over the centuries, scholars, pilgrims, and local traditions have offered various sites as possible tombs of the legendary biblical monarch. The first one is the city of David. Situated just south of the present-day Old City walls and east of the ancient Temple Mount, it is considered the oldest continuously settled part of Jerusalem. Excavations have revealed extensive remains from the Bronze and Iron Ages, including fortifications, water tunnels, and monumental structures dating to the 10th century BCE, the traditional period of David and Solomon's reigns. Within this area, archaeologists have identified clusters of rock-cut tombs carved into the slopes of the Kidron Valley. These tombs, some dating back to the Iron Age II, roughly 1000 to 586 BCE, have long been suggested as potential burial places of the kings of Judah. The biblical text itself refers to a burial place of the kings in the city of David, implying a dynastic necropolis that might have included David, Solomon, and their successors. Several chambers near the Gihon Spring and along the eastern slope of the city of David have been examined as possible royal burial sites. In the early 20th century, French archaeologist Raymond Weil conducted excavations that uncovered a series of underground halls, passageways, and cut stone chambers. Weil believed he had discovered the tombs of the House of David, interpreting the massive rock-cut features as royal sepulchres. These included long corridors leading to chambers hewn directly into the bedrock, some showing signs of ancient quarrying or unfinished work. Although his identification generated excitement, later scholars have debated his conclusions, with many suggesting that the chambers functioned as storerooms, cisterns, or quarry spaces rather than tombs. The lack of inscriptions or funerary goods makes a definitive interpretation difficult. Further discoveries in the city of David, such as monumental stepped structures and large public buildings unearthed by archaeologists like Kathleen Kenyon in the 1960s, and, more recently, Eilat Mazar, have reinforced the area's importance during the 10th century BCE. However, no single tomb has been securely linked to Solomon. The steep terrain of the Kidron Valley does contain Iron Age burial caves, some of which may have served as resting places for Jerusalem's elite. Still, without inscriptions or datable artifacts, the hypothesis that Solomon lies somewhere in this network of chambers remains speculative. Archaeologists stress that if the royal necropolis did exist within the city of David, centuries of construction, destruction, and quarrying may have obliterated or concealed its remains. But that's not all. From the Byzantine period onward, pilgrims to the Holy Land sought to identify sacred sites linked to biblical figures. Caves and shrines across Jerusalem and its surrounding hills became associated with patriarchs, prophets, and kings. Solomon, as a central figure in Jewish, Christian, and Islamic tradition, was naturally linked with several of these places. In some traditions, caves beneath the Temple Mount were thought to conceal the tombs of the Davidic kings, including Solomon. These subterranean spaces, such as Zedekiah's Cave, also called Solomon's Quarries, extending under the old city's northern wall, were often woven into stories connecting them with the construction of the temple and the life of Solomon himself. Zedekiah's Cave, a vast underground limestone quarry stretching over 5 acres beneath Jerusalem's old city, became particularly associated with Solomon's legend. Medieval travelers and chroniclers claimed that the quarry provided the stone for Solomon's temple and, by extension, speculated that royal tombs might also exist within its hidden recesses. No archaeological evidence, however, supports the claim that Solomon was buried there. Instead, the cave's significance lies in its use as a quarry during the Iron Age and later periods. Other traditions pointed to sites on the Mount of Olives, east of the Temple Mount, where monumental tombs from the Second Temple period, such as the tomb of Absalom, the tomb of Zechariah, and the tomb of Beni Hezir, became linked by local law to biblical figures. Though datable to the 1st century BCE and CE, well after Solomon's time, these imposing monuments fueled beliefs that royal or prophetic burials could be found in their vicinity. Pilgrims often blended biblical narrative with visible remains, creating a sacred geography that placed Solomon within the landscape of accessible tombs and shrines. Islamic tradition also preserved strong connections to Solomon. He is known as Suleiman in Arabic and revered as both a prophet and a king. Certain shrines around Jerusalem and beyond were attributed to him, though not specifically his burial place. For example, the Dome of the Rock, constructed in the late 7th century CE, became associated with Solomon's temple, reinforcing the sense that Solomon's presence lingered at the very heart of Jerusalem's sacred topography. Unfortunately, the biblical text offers only the vague phrase "City of David," and subsequent centuries of urban development have obscured much of the ancient city's original topography. Excavations have revealed Iron Age remains consistent with Solomon's era, including potential burial complexes, but none can be securely linked to him. So, what do we know? King Solomon's death and burial in biblical tradition. The biblical account of King Solomon's death and burial provides only a brief glimpse into the final chapter of the ruler who, according to tradition, presided over Israel's Golden Age. In 1 Kings 11-41-43, the narrative concludes Solomon's reign by stating that he slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, while his son Rehoboam ascended to the throne. The chronicler echoes this in 2 Chronicles 9:29-31, summarizing Solomon's achievements and recording that he reigned for 40 years before being buried in the city of David. These passages are concise, offering no details of the burial itself, the nature of the tomb, or any associated rituals. This is a broader pattern in the biblical tradition. Royal annals often end with formulaic notices of a king's reign length and place of burial. The reference to the City of David is central to understanding Solomon's burial. The City of David refers to the oldest settled ridge of Jerusalem, located just south of the current old city walls and adjacent to the Gihon Spring. Archaeological excavations conducted since the 19th century have confirmed this area as the nucleus of Jerusalem in the 10th century BCE, aligning with the biblical period of David and Solomon. Discoveries include massive fortifications, stepped stone structures, water systems, and evidence of urban activity from the Iron Age too. Within this area, archaeologists have also identified rock-cut tombs, some dating to the Iron Age, which may correspond to the tombs of the kings mentioned in the biblical record. While no tomb has been definitively linked to Solomon, the City of David remains the most plausible context for his burial based on both scripture and archaeology. The description of Solomon's burial with his fathers suggests a dynastic necropolis where successive kings of Judah were interred. The practice of family or dynastic burials was widespread in the ancient Near East, where royal houses often constructed elaborate necropolis to reinforce continuity and legitimacy. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Anatolia, royal burials symbolized not only the end of an individual reign, but also the perpetuation of dynastic rule. In Jerusalem, the City of David appears to have functioned similarly, housing the tombs of David, Solomon, and their successors. Later texts, such as Nehemiah 3:16, which mentions the tombs of David, confirm that such a necropolis was remembered well into the Persian period. The brevity of the biblical notice contrasts with Solomon's reputation as one of the most significant monarchs of the ancient world. According to the narrative, he reigned for 40 years, roughly from the mid-10th century BCE, presiding over a united kingdom stretching from the Euphrates River to Egypt's border. His reign was associated with unprecedented wealth, monumental building projects, including the First Temple in Jerusalem, and international diplomacy, exemplified by the visit of the Queen of Sheba. His burial in the City of David, the same site as his father David, symbolized both continuity and closure. In Jewish tradition, Solomon's burial reinforced his status as one of Israel's greatest kings, despite the biblical narrative's ambivalence about his later years. Rabbinic literature preserved stories of his wisdom and achievements, and although it acknowledged his faults, it did not diminish the sanctity attached to his person. The tomb of Solomon, like that of David, came to embody the memory of the monarchy's golden age. By the Second Temple period, Jewish memory of the tombs of the kings in Jerusalem was strong enough that Nehemiah and later writers referenced them as landmarks in the city. Yet these references never gave precise locations. Christian tradition inherited the biblical account and placed Solomon within its broader theological framework. The Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke reference the Queen of Sheba's visit to hear Solomon's wisdom, presenting him as a type or foreshadowing of Christ's greater wisdom. While Christian sources did not claim to know the exact location of Solomon's tomb, the association of the city of David with sacred kingship remained. Pilgrims in the Byzantine period and later often sought tangible remains of Solomon's burial, sometimes identifying caves or monumental tombs around Jerusalem with his name. These identifications, however, were rooted in pious tradition rather than evidence. Islamic sources, likewise, do not specify his burial place. However, shrines and caves in Jerusalem were sometimes linked to Solomon in local folklore. In all three Abrahamic faiths, the burial of Solomon became less a question of archaeology and more a matter of sanctity. So far, excavations in the city of David have revealed rock-cut tombs dating to the Iron Age, but without inscriptions or associated artifacts, linking them to specific kings remains impossible. Theories abound, ranging from underground chambers beneath the city of David to caves beneath the Temple Mount, but no firm evidence exists. Then there's Jerusalem's continuous occupation, urban development, and cycles of destruction, from the Babylonian conquest in 586 BCE to Roman and later reconstructions. This may have obliterated or concealed the burial places of its early kings. Archaeological challenges and misconceptions, the tombs of the kings in Jerusalem illustrate the complexities and pitfalls of interpreting archaeological sites, especially when biblical associations and popular imagination intersect with material evidence. While the monument's grandeur initially suggested a connection to the kings of Judah, careful analysis of architectural and epigraphic data has firmly placed the tomb complex in the Roman period, specifically the 1st century CE, roughly a millennium after Solomon's reign, which is traditionally dated to the mid-10th century BCE. The rock-cut facade features classical elements, such as pilasters, friezes, rosettes, and cornices, all consistent with Hellenistic and Roman influence on Second Temple period funerary architecture. Moreover, inscriptions discovered within the tomb, including Aramaic references to figures linked to Queen Helena of Adiabene, clearly indicate that the occupants were a wealthy foreign dynasty that had converted to Judaism rather than Israelite monarchs. This chronological mismatch makes any claim connecting the tombs to Solomon archaeologically untenable. Archaeological consensus has, over the past century, consistently reinforced that the site belonged to Helena's family. Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, provides a textual anchor for this identification, describing Helena's relocation to Jerusalem around 45 CE, her patronage of the temple, and her commissioning of a family mausoleum. The combination of textual evidence, inscriptions, and material culture, including sarcophagi and architectural style, supports the view that the tombs served as a dynastic burial complex for her family. Early misinterpretations, such as those propagated by Louis Félicien de Saulcy during his 1863 excavation, were driven largely by biblical assumptions rather than critical analysis. De Saulcy genuinely believed, or so he said, that he had discovered the final resting place of Solomon. It was with this enthusiasm that centuries after King Solomon's death, this tomb was opened. But we already know that the burial chamber did not house the legendary biblical king at all. The scale and ostentation of the complex also led to sensational reports in Europe that the site had revealed Israelite royalty. Subsequent scholarship, however, corrected these misidentifications through rigorous dating methods and comparative architectural study. One of the recurring misconceptions arises from the human tendency to conflate monumental architecture with biblical narrative. Jerusalem's rich scriptural history and its centrality to Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions make it easy for lay observers to assume that impressive structures must correspond to figures like Solomon. Yet archaeology relies on objective criteria: stratigraphy, typology of construction, stylistic analysis, and epigraphic evidence. Without inscriptions explicitly naming Solomon or associated administrative records, no site in Jerusalem, including the tombs of the kings, can be definitively attributed to him. We must thus separate myth, tradition, and conjecture from empirical data. The real burial sites of Solomon and the early kings of Judah likely lie within the city of David, situated just south of the present Old City, near the Gihon Spring. However, so far, no inscriptions or datable funerary objects have been found that can link any particular tomb to Solomon or his immediate dynasty. Continuous urban reuse, quarrying, and destruction over millennia have further obscured potential royal burial sites, making the recovery of definitive evidence extremely challenging. Jerusalem's continuous habitation has compounded these difficulties. From the Babylonian destruction in 586 BCE to subsequent Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman constructions, much of the original Iron Age context has been lost or disturbed. Layers of settlement, reconstruction, and looting complicate stratigraphic analysis, which is essential for accurately dating and interpreting archaeological features. Even when Iron Age tombs survive, the absence of inscriptions or associated grave goods makes identification speculative at best. Modern archaeologists must therefore employ meticulous stratigraphic recording, radiocarbon dating where feasible, and comparative studies of architectural and epigraphic patterns to draw any reliable conclusions. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.